If you're battling chronic illnesses like Lyme disease or autoimmune conditions like celiac, Hashimoto's, or endometriosis, and traditional treatments aren't giving you the relief you need, this episode is for you. Today, I'm discussing natural approaches to managing these complex conditions with someone who's lived it firsthand. You'll discover why conventional testing often misses these telltale biomarkers, how stress and mindset affect your symptoms more than you think, and practical strategies that can help you take control of your health. Whether you're newly diagnosed or have been fighting symptoms for years, today's conversation will give you a new perspective on managing chronic illness naturally. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the podcast that blends evidence and engineering to help you build smart, efficient systems to achieve your dream physique. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today I've invited on Heather Gray to discuss natural approaches to managing chronic illness and autoimmune conditions. After spending 3 decades navigating multiple diagnoses, including Lyme disease, celiac disease, Hashimoto's, and endometriosis, Heather now helps others as a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. Today, you're going to learn how to advocate for proper testing, understand the mind-body connection in chronic illness, and as always, practical strategies for managing symptoms naturally through your lifestyle. Heather, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Woohoo! Thanks for having me.
So, I brought you on here because we want to talk about something a lot of people struggle with and probably a lot of people silently struggle with, and that is a number of known issues, right? From Hashimoto's or symptoms that go unexplained or undiagnosed, and then combine that with what I'll say is inconsistent expertise in the medical field. Let's be honest, a bit of gaslighting too, right?
A bit?
A bit, yes. I'm being...
Is it?
Yeah. And I know you're the comedian, so you can take that where you want. And then like a pharmaceutical heavy approach, right? That's the other piece. So sometimes for people, maybe it seems hopeless or like they have no clue where to go. And so somebody listening or watching right now who wants to be inspired, they need a little bit of help. They're like, how do I even get started? What's the thing that they're missing that could make the biggest difference, like for their next step in managing or reversing these conditions?
There's a lot of big questions in there.
Yes.
I was like, which one do I start with? Which one do I
Yes.
peel back? No, gaslit. That is actually, I talk about that in my stand-up. I talk about being gaslit basically my whole life. And they say that women are like twice as, it takes twice as long for them to get a proper diagnosis over a male because it's still that type of gaslighting, and women are just hysterical, and it's just our hormones, and our hormones get blamed for everything. It's insane. But yeah, so where to start? That's a great question. So I am a big fan of not focusing on treatment, right? Like I'm going to die on that hill. Stop focusing on treatment, because once you dial in lifestyle, mindset, diet, exercise, proper exercise, hydration, rest, like magic happens. This world is not conducive for human health, period. End of story. Between the artificial lights, the EMFs, the toxins in our environment, in our food, in our water, the fast pace, the constant fight or flight we're stuck in, like it's a hot mess. And I mean, as you read off the laundry list of, diagnoses that I have, I'm a walking, talking model proof of all these toxins, all these issues, and what can happen once you start cleaning things up.
Yeah, and we were joking about broken water heaters before we started recording, and how like you and I, business owners, we're stressed. We were trying to juggle like super busy schedules, and there's sensory overload. I do like what you just said. Stop focusing on treatment, because lifestyle could be the solution, or at least it'll get you a lot of the way there, right? Like sometimes when we talk about hormone replacement and someone says, should I do that or should I do lifestyle? I'm like, well, do the lifestyle. You may need the hormone replacement. I don't know, but always do the lifestyle. Like go train and go be active and eat the right way.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Like
do it anyway.
This is where you start, because even if you get on hormone replacement therapy, you might need less, right?
Yes.
Like because you're starting to get things moving the way our bodies are just so brilliantly made that once we get out of the way and give it what it needs, it's amazing. It's amazing what it can do. Absolutely no short of a miracle. Like I said, the stuff that I have dealt with in my life, the things that I have overcome, 2 suicide attempts, horrific pain, being 100 pounds overweight, not digesting anything, psychosis from mold, like you name it. I have been through it. And the fact that I now, shoot, I run 2 podcasts. I have my practice. I just got hired in a very prominent cancer doctor's practice to be her head coach. I do stand-up comedy. I travel. Like, my life is not for the faint of heart, and it wouldn't be this way if I didn't dial in these lifestyle tweaks and continue to keep some sort of a maintenance going. Like, sleep is my religion.
Hmm.
I make sure I detox every week. Like, there's certain non-negotiables that I have, because if I don't, I'm a little on the different side. I'm the canary in the coal mine. I've gotten some really, I got dealt some pretty shitty hands with genetics and not detoxing properly. I don't make vitamin D, store it, transport it properly. So it was fun to see these kind of weaknesses within my genes. But as you know, or hopefully I think what's in our genes is not the be all end all. There's got something called epigenetics, which is our lifestyle and toxins and that sort of thing on how the genes get expressed. So there's so many
Yeah.
people that are like, oh my God, I have the BRCA gene, I'm down to get
Yep.
cancer. And they start
Yep.
to cut off their breasts. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's why I work for this cancer doctor I work for, is because she is totally in alignment with, let's clean up all this stuff first before we ever talk about chemo and mastectomies and all that stuff. And it is incredible. I'm just so impressed with what she's doing as a doctor, because she was surgical, medically trained, but then went back to school, learned the functional way. And what we're seeing, the results with her clients are
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few things that people are thinking of, like, okay, you had all these different symptoms. You also have an environment that's not made for humans. You mentioned, we have genetics, whether we blame our genetics or not, they're there, but they're not, they're the noise in the signal oftentimes. But at the same time, you did have some things that were unique for you, like the vitamin D deficiency. So if somebody, a woman listening, or somebody who's facing what they can't diagnose, it's chronic fatigue. I know a friend who has chronic fatigue he's dealt with for years, and it's fibromyalgia, or one of those areas where it's kind of mysterious. What were the early signs you had, and when did you decide that you needed to look into this, not just address the lifestyle, but I imagine there's other things you have to do to pinpoint what it is for you, right? What the issue is for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I love
Yeah.
saying, no matter how common a symptom may be, it is never normal, right? It's always your body's check engine light coming on saying, hey, dummy, there's something going on in here. And all too often, we've been brainwashed, to reach for over the counter medications, right? Which is just puts a band aid
Hmm.
over that check engine light. And then our body just keeps screaming louder and louder and louder until we have an autoimmune disease, or we have cancer, or we have, something bigger and scarier. But it started with me. Like, I always start off, I was 4 years old and I was basically born full of shit. Like, how many people can relate to being constipated as a little kid? And that started my let's throw band-aids at symptoms, model with thick, nasty oils, laxatives. But nobody was asking why this 4-year-old couldn't poop. Hindsight's 2020. That was
Did you have a lot of prune juice back then?
I don't remember.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I don't remember. I doubt it. I doubt it. I was eating a standard American diet.
Yeah.
I was being raised by alcoholic addicts, very young alcoholic addicts, and my uncle had just committed suicide. So there was a lot of early childhood trauma that I think churned on my celiac disease. Like I said, I was eating the standard American, or the SAD diet. And it's kind of what started me to be the perfect storm. And so that's the one thing that I love teaching people is, even with Lyme disease, they're like, I got bit by a chick and I got sick. No, actually, you've been becoming the perfect host for probably 1 year, 5 years, 15 years before you ever got to the place where Lyme disease could take over. Same thing with cancer. I just got cancer. It's in my history. No, I hate to tell you, it's probably been a lifetime full of stress and toxins and bad diet. And now you're, quote unquote, again, the perfect host, right? So I was living in some moldy environments when I was a kid. Like I said, a lot of trauma. And when I was 13 and got bit by a tick, I was the perfect host. So I got diagnosed 2 years. No, I didn't get diagnosed 2 years later. I started showing symptoms 2 years later with my first suicide attempt. That was the first of 2 or 3 in the psych ward. So much fun. I just need to write a book about my experience in the psych ward, because this was before they actually separated and had different wings for
Mm,
young adults. So
okay.
I was 15 in with adults. And some of the stories I could tell you would just, ugh. But anywho, So yeah, hindsight's 2020. 27 years later, I'm 34 and I finally get diagnosed. I had been to probably 30 or 40 different practitioners. And if that's the one thing I can tell people is like, listen to your intuition. If you know something's up, but you keep going to practitioner, and they say your labs look normal and they don't find anything wrong with you, next, keep looking. And typically, I found that functional practitioners have a tendency to look a little bit deeper, more root cause. Their lab ranges are different. So, like for
Hmm.
vitamin D, people are like, well, what's functional medicine compared to regular medicine? Vitamin D. The Western model is looking for disease, period. That's it.
Based on the
We
population too.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's a
Yeah.
sick population, right? So
Yes.
that it's gonna skew that bell curve. So, like for me, my vitamin D was in the 30s. Well, according to Western Med, 30 to 80 is optimal. And it's not. In functional med, we want it to be 60 to 80. That means that you're actually performing properly, right? And that you're functioning, not just close to flatlining and a disease. So it was after on a podcast, I heard the founder of FDN, Reed Davis. He was with Sean Croxton, who wrote the book Underground Wellness. He used to have a pretty popular podcast, and he was talking about how you got to, make sure the hormones are balanced and that your gut is healed, and you got to detox.
Hmm.
I was a silly hairstylist at the time. I didn't have a background in medicine. But intuitively, something hit, and I was like, "That's it. That's how I'm going to get better." And so very, very sick with a young kid and my own business going through this course, just a Hail Mary hoping that we were going to find answers. And that was the start of my journey. That was back in 2013.
Yeah, and it obviously a lot of tough situations to get through that you dealt with that created what you said, that environment for being the perfect host, which, just so I understand that phrase, this is a combination of the environment we're in as well as our behaviors and genetics. Like what do you mean by that? The perfect host? Can you explain it a little further?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Anything that lowers your immune system and
Okay.
allows critters to overcome your good guys, the stuff that we do. So birth control, antibiotics, other prescription medications lead to a leaky gut. So if you've got a leaky gut, then we've got a compromised immune system. The stress causes a leaky gut. We have a compromised immune system. Now you're not getting enough sleep. I was living in a moldy home. So all these things stacked up against my immune system, making me vulnerable, making
Got
me
it.
more
Yeah.
susceptible to these things. So that's what I mean about the perfect host.
Good. Yeah. I want people to understand because, yeah, and gut health, I know you briefly alluded to that. We're learning so much more now about the microbiome and its impact on everything. It's even like the second brain of your body, right? You said listen to your intuition, and that kind of hits on the gaslighting thing a bit from the other end, because we all know multiple people in our lives, and ourselves included. I mean, my own wife and friends and family and grandparents and parents, everybody's been affected by this, where they go to the doctor, they get some sort of half-ass treatment, and then it doesn't work. They go again, they either get another treatment, or they're told, well, you just got to deal with it, or it'll go away, or you know what I mean? Or there's so many inadequate answers. And the idea that if you don't have the answer, you've got to keep going. You've got to be persistent and be in control of your health. I mean, I have a personal, just a quick little almost silly story of, I was taking an inhaler. I was breathing it in for a esophageal issue. And after about a year of it, my voice started to go hoarse. And as a podcaster, this is not great. My voice started to go hoarse, and I
Sure,
Googled
sound like a smoker.
it. Yeah, right. I Googled it, which in the past you'd say that's dangerous. Nowadays, I'm like, I'm okay if you want to start with Google, because you might get some surprising things that come up. And
Start with ChatGPT over Google.
yeah, there you go. Nowadays, this didn't. Yeah, and it said steroid-induced hoarseness. I'm like, well, that sounds like exactly what it is. So guess what? I took the doctor, and he's like, no, that's not a thing. Oh, really? So then I went to a different doctor. No, that's not a thing. And so I experimented. I went off it. I went off on it. Every time I did, guess what? The hoarseness went away, and then it came back. And finally, the doctor like admitted he learned something from this, put through his arrogance. And so that kind of that's my personal, like, I get angry at it, and I'm not gonna say silly, but it was minor for me, but it's a lot more major for a lot of people depending on what issue they're
Oh my
dealing with,
God. My kid
right?
was diagnosed
Yeah.
with celiac disease 2 months after his second birthday. His belly had been so distended for so long, the muscles actually separated like a pregnant person. You could count his ribs, skinny little arms with this great big distended belly. And I remember seeing the hospital's dietitian for the first time, and I educated her on the celiac diet. Like they were I felt like I should bill her. It was so insane.
What year was this? What, like,
This was back in 2012,
yeah.
2011. It
Because
was a
everybody
while.
knows about celiac disease now,
Yeah.
you would think.
No,
Yeah.
this was right
Yeah.
at the edge, and I was just
Right
like,
the
"Oh
edge.
my
Yeah.
god." But even then, they don't know, like, it's one of the biggest misnomers with celiac is that there's so all the gluten-free, quote, unquote, "grains," a lot of them cross-react like wheat.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
corn, rice, and they've even got their own form of gluten.
Right.
It's crazy, and oats, so I tell people with celiac, it's still if you because they'll feel better for a while and then they stop and then they usually go backwards again and they don't know why. I've seen it with myself. I saw it with my kid. I've seen it with my patients. And I'm like, if you really want to get better from celiac, kind of heal and be more robust, you need to go grain free because
Yeah.
those things are just, all the gluten free. And a lot of times they're swapping out just regular processed crap for gluten free processed crap,
Sure, sure.
you know.
Like the classic vegan diet. I kind of
Oh
joke about
my
it.
God.
It's like all
So
processed foods.
bad. So bad.
But so if we take that celiac example, because there are so many, if someone suspects they have it, or like, where am I trying to go here? People are thinking, okay, I have symptoms. I have no idea what it is. Where do I start? And then there's also, I have symptoms. I think it could be this. What do I do? Maybe those are two different scenarios. But let's start with the celiac one. You know, people are confused. Do they get food and allergy testing? Do they get blood work? Do they have to go to a special doctor, special FDN? Like, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
overwhelming.
No, it's a good point. And a lot of times the testing that a regular doctor will do is not going to unearth what you're looking for,
Mhm.
unfortunately. So, like with Lyme disease, they will still use a Western blot. And Western blot is good if you can catch it like within the first 6 months. Outside of that, it's crap because it's looking for an immune response, and a lot of
Mm,
times Lyme has shut down that immune response, and there's a couple, like, bands missing because of some controversial crap that goes on with our FDA, and so you're not gonna get a real good answer from a traditional doctor's Western blot, unfortunately.
mhm.
So, I like starting people off with these intake forms. I have 2 intake forms altogether are about 500 questions. Like it'll take you a good hour to fill out. But it is really awesome at helping tease out, is it gut issues? Is it Lyme? Is it autoimmune? Is it heavy metals? Looking at the lifestyle. Back when I first unfortunately, when they train FDNs and a lot of functional doctors, they just wanna, like, $5,000 worth of labs right off the bat. I found out very quickly that not everybody could afford $5,000 worth of labs, and then another $5,000 worth of, quote, unquote, "treatment" or supplement support, that type of thing. So I really got great at case management and looking at the history and looking at, all these different puzzle pieces that kind of helped me put it together. And then if I felt like further testing needed to be done, I'd be like, I maybe want you to do this stool sample, or maybe I want you to do this genetic test because I want to see if you've got the genes for celiac, or, it just kind of depends. But really starting with that case history and extreme intake form, I think is a really great place to start, because if you got somebody who's just wanting to throw either $1,000 worth of supplements at you right off the bat, or $6,000 worth of lab tests right off the bat, you might want to run because yeah.
Yes, yes. No, no, I've seen it. In some of there's a lot of new precision medicine companies that have just, popped up out of nowhere. You got to be careful because their end game may be affiliate sales from supplements, right?
Right.
You got to watch out. So I like what you said though, because when I think of, like, in my nutrition coaching practice, how it's very personalized. You really have to understand the whole person and how everything interacts and the whole system of, like, their history. What is in that kind of assessment in general? Are there any symptoms that you ask for there? Is it their physical, like, movement history as well as their medical history? I'm just curious what kind of lifestyle
All
things are
the
in there.
above.
Everything. It's 500
All the
questions. So
I
it's
wanna know if you had got mercury in your mouth, or if you had a root canal, because if so,
okay.
you might be susceptible to cavitations, which are one of the biggest barriers to health. I need to know if you've had a mold exposure, have you been
Yeah.
tested for
Okay.
sleep apnea? What's your trauma like? Because 9 times out of 10, even with cancer, these cancer diagnoses, if you look back 1 to a year and a half before their cancer diagnosis, something happened. It's insane. Every single time something happened. Lyme disease, like I said, talked with but a lot of people haven't put the pieces together. So
Mm,
that's one of the first things I started asking for is, okay, so you get diagnosed in 2021. What, that's pretty common these days. Things are starting to happen in 2021, 2022. What happened before that? COVID
mhm.
stressed everybody else out, whether they got vaccinated or not vaccinated. That's a whole nother freaking set of can of worms. But, digging into the mental, emotional, and the stress part of their life as well, because that's the other thing that a lot of doctors aren't talking about. And sometimes those are the biggest wins. I had a guy that worked with me for over a year, and I thought he knew my methodology by that time, but he didn't. I'm still really stressed out and anxious. Can you give me another supplement? I said, did you do your grounding exercise today? Get your feet out on the ground for 20 minutes today? No. Have you gotten sun on your eyes today? No. Have you taken a 20-minute walk today? No. Have you done your meditation today? No. Have you done your journaling today? No. Have you done your breath work today? No. I'm not giving you any more supplements. Like until you learn how to move your nervous system out of fight or flight and into rest or digest, all these pills, even though they might be healthier than their alternatives, it's still just a supplement. That's what supplements are for. They're supplements. They're not supposed to be the be all end all.
100%. 100%. People want a shortcut and make excuses. I love that. So, would you then, is your approach to not the extreme, but to the level where you start with lifestyle on day one, or do you still want to do some sort of parallel assessment and start with lifestyle? Like, what does that process look like?
It depends on the
Yeah,
person.
it depends. Yeah.
Everyone is so different. And I found that, the Lyme patients and a lot of the cancer patients are a lot more sophisticated than other patients out there because they've had to be their own health advocate for
Mm.
so long, especially Lyme. Freaking chronic Lyme just got accepted as a diagnosis 2 years ago.
Wow.
The
Okay.
freaking disease that
I live in
haunts
Connecticut,
my
by the way,
life.
and I've
Okay,
heard
yeah.
about Lyme for years. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny.
The thing that has haunted me for decades just got recognized by the CDC as a real diagnosis.
Yeah.
Chronic Lyme. Like, wrap your brain around that one. So we've had to become our own health advocate. We had to become our own health detective. And so it just depends on where a person's at. But I try to do parallel. Like I'll start maybe working with them on food stuff. At the same time, I'm working on them with mindset stuff. It's so funny. So when I was getting into the functional practitioner, I was really great at doing the physical stuff, right?
Hmm.
Diet, no problem. In bed by 10. Okay. Coffee enema, sure, no problem. And then I would get better and I'd relapse. And then I would get better again and then I'd relapse. And the book, The Body Keeps Score, came across my desk. And if you haven't read it, it's a really tough read, especially if you have any kind of trauma, sexual trauma. And I'm on the couch, like ugly crying, and my ex-husband's like, what the fuck are you reading? And I'm like, this little girl and her dad. And he's like, no, 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 I don't want to hear it. But it was the first time that it was really explained to me how these traumas get stuck in your nervous system and keep you in fight or flight, right? And they can be big T traumas, little T traumas, but either way, they get stuck in your system. And we're not meant to be running from a tiger 24/7.
Hmm.
And that's part of the reason why I kept relapsing. And so once I started moving the needle on my nervous system, somatic experiencing work, breath work, uh, tapping, cold plunges, plant medicine completely changed my life. Total different ball game. So then I haven't had a relapse of Lyme in 5 years. I haven't had an autoimmune flare. I've had nothing. I have whatever I get, right? When I got the flu, it's the flu. When I got a cold, I got the cold. But I don't get any of these other like quote unquote flares, which breaks my heart because so many people think that that's also just kind of normal. Oh, autoimmune flare. Oh, I'm
Hmm.
having a
Hmm.
Lyme flare. And I'm like, You don't have to have that."
Right. You hear that, like, especially like with GI issues a lot. I hear that, like the diverticulitis, IBS, and all that, like the flare ups.
Yeah.
And you're saying, because I want people to, people are skeptical, obviously, of a lot of this stuff listening. And we're not talking about that you're curing these things, but you're helping manage or put them into remission or avoid, like you said, flare ups with the lifestyle changes. And it comes down to stress and the sympathetic versus parasympathetic state that we're in. So I do love that because we talk about stress a lot as being just one of those massive pillars, and it ties into your sleep and your sleep quality. And we talk a lot about strength training. I'm curious about your thoughts on just on lifting weights and strength training and resistance
Oh
training
my
in the
god,
context of all of
it's
this.
the bestest thing in the whole
Yeah.
wide world. Like, you have to continue to lift weights, and especially anybody over 40, like, if you're wanting to keep your structure, your balance, like, any kind of a good lifestyle as we age, we have got to keep our bones and our muscles strong. Over cardio, I think is absolutely destroying people.
Yeah. Over cardio.
And I'm
Yep.
and
Mhm.
I'm not a fan, and I found out in my genetics I have thin veins, thin walls in my veins, which means that if I do cardio for very long, much longer than, like, 30 minutes, it actually causes inflammation. It causes more stress in my body than it's worth, so I have a diminishing return of
Mhm.
investment if I overwork out with cardio. But weights, I love weights. I love pushing something heavy. I just got back into it again. I don't know why I got out. I say that every single time. I'm like, "Oh, I feel great. Why did I ever stop?"
But yeah, no, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that with regards to the nervous system and stress too, because people, it's underrated. It's like an
Oh,
underrated form of,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
and you also mentioned menopause, and we're learning more and more how because of the hormone changes, right? Your muscle mass loss accelerates at that age if you're not doing anything to hold on to it, and because you tend to eat the same amount of food,
Right.
your body fat goes up, and then your metabolism goes down, and it all just spirals. Okay, so I know we're going on little tangents
I know
here.
I went on some tangents, I
No,
apologize.
I love tangents. It's
A
great.
squirrel.
It's great. Yeah, I guess I know if I'm thinking of what the listener is asking, they're probably wondering there's all these protocols and all these treatments. And when you talk about lifestyle and you hear something like cold plunges, again, I know what people are thinking. Are there 30 things I have to do every day just to be healthy? And I know that's, do I have to do grounding and cold plunges, this and that? And sometimes I skeptically poo poo on those things when I'm like, are you even lifting weights and walking and eating right? Like, I think there's a hierarchy. What are
Oh,
your thoughts on that?
absolutely,
Yeah. Yeah. What are your
absolutely.
thoughts on
I just
like
got done
what
doing
people,
an
yeah.
interview
Yeah.
talking about how I love biohacking because all the
Yeah.
tools, right now I've this thing generates frequencies through a red light. This is a tracking ring. This is an
Yeah.
EMF blanket. This is
Yes.
like I've got like 10 biohacking tools around me at any given time. But that's because I told you I was kind of dealt a shitty hand when it came to my genetics, and I have to work a little harder. But it's never, never, never in place of lifestyle. Lifestyle
Mhm.
stuff always comes first. For me, when people are in the thick of healing, yes, sometimes it can be, I say all the time, sometimes my self care feels like a part time job, but it's better than being full time sick. And it's all how you frame
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
All how you
It
frame it. I don't,
saves
it's
time, money, and years down the line.
absolutely, it's
Yep.
not I have to, it's I
Yeah.
get to,
Yeah.
right? And so when you
It's an act
switch,
of self care for your future self.
absolutely, it's a
Yeah.
huge act of love. So, yeah, it's doing that, but now, now I sauna every day, I do ground every day, I do meditate every day, so there's certain things, and I try to habit stack when I can.
Yeah. Habit stack. It's good.
I only do coffee enemas once a week now, they used to be more because, like I said, I was born full of shit, that constipation never really changed much, so that's one of those things that I do to keep myself running in that, and this is a very toxic world. So yeah, there was a documentary out there, I guess, where this guy was like a billionaire doing all these biohacks, and like he literally had no time to live because he was doing so many. That's extreme. That's
Oh, the,
ridiculous.
the the one that came out where it's like about living a long life. That guy
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
extend his
Well,
life.
okay,
Oh
but he's
yeah.
not really living.
No,
That's
yeah,
that's
no,
the
I hear you.
problem. And I think he even said that towards the end. Someone told me,
He also doesn't
but
look like he lifts weights, but that's my own like pet peeve on some of these guys.
oh, I know, right? No, weights are absolutely crucial. I'll tell them you got to stop your cardio, but I want you walking, yoga, stretching, and weightlifting like that. Absolutely, as we're healing.
Yeah.
So many benefits.
With the comedy, I think that's really cool because it's hard. Like I do public speaking and speech contests, but I consider myself highly unfunny. And so in the past, I've competed in humorous speech contests, deliberately to make myself try to write jokes, right? Which I think is great. You got to get out of your comfort zone.
Oh, absolutely.
So if people are listening, like, oh, that's interesting. That could be something I would enjoy, or I'm into humor, or I was the class clown or whatever. I'm thinking, like, what do you recommend for folks to get into it themselves? I know it's a real
I took
side
a
tangent.
class. I took a class.
Like
So it was,
improv?
yeah, and it was stand up.
Oh, stand up. Like,
So
okay.
it was funny. There's another doctor, his name's Dr. Sam Shea, and he's on the spectrum and he does stand up. He has a one-man show called Neurospicy.
Okay.
I met with him in person one day because I do a lot of networking with fellow, practitioners. And within 5 minutes, he knew I wanted to speak more and be on keynotes. And he was like, have you ever thought about doing stand up? I was like, why on earth would I do that to myself? And he's like, because it's a really great skill to have if you're going to be a speaker. It looks really good on your resume. And I was like, okay. And he goes, do you have any trauma in your life? I said, how long do you have for lunch?
Mm.
And he goes, I think you'd be really good at it. You should take this class with me. And actually, that was a week ago last year. So I've been doing stand up for a year. I've actually made money this year. I've been on over like 50 shows, which isn't a
Like
typical.
in clubs and bars and stuff?
Yeah.
Just, yeah.
Yeah.
Where can we find, like, are you on YouTube for that?
I'm on YouTube. Yeah. And
Okay.
then there's a comedy page on my website,
Yeah.
Renegade Health Boss. So
All right. Yeah. I just personally want to check that out selfishly. So I'm gonna go watch that later. I love stand-up comedy. There's so much of it now too on like all the streaming services. There's like
right.
too much, right?
My name is Tony. I'm a strength lifter in my 40s, and I'd just like to say thank you to Phil and his Wits and Weights community for helping me learn more about nutrition and how to implement better ideas into my strength training. Phil has a very, very good understanding of macros and chemical compounds and hormones and all that, and he's continuously learning. And that's what I like about Phil. He's got a great sense of humor. We'll go back and forth. He's very relaxed, very easy to talk to. One of the greatest things about Phil, in my view, is that he practices what he preaches. He also works out with barbells. He trains heavy, not as heavy as me, but he trains heavy. He lifts, so he knows programs. He knows different variations. So if you talk with him about getting in better shape or eating better, he's probably going to give you some good advice, and I would strongly recommend you talk with him, and he'll help you out. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, no. So tangents, where do we want to come back to, Heather? What's something that you want listeners to learn about you that can help them in ways that where, like, if they don't hear this advice, that 20 years are going to go by that they regret not having heard it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
No pressure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That not to give up,
Yeah.
that, like I said, no matter how common a symptom may be, it is never normal. And everything is figure outable for the most part. It makes me so sad with these people who get diagnosed with Hashimoto's or other autoimmune, and their doctor tells them they have to be on a biological or some other steroid or cortisone or something for the rest of their life. That is absolute BS. And if you're willing to put in the work, because it's not easy going against the grain of society. Sometimes it can feel a little lonely, a little isolating. And I'm finding that it is getting easier. Like, people are starting to wake up, like red dyes. Woohoo! The FDA finally decided they're going to ban red dye 5. It's going to be another 3 years. So do yourself a favor and freaking ban it in your own house, because that stuff's
Yeah.
been linked to autoimmune issues, mental health issues, ADHD. But there's slowly but slowly, it's starting to come around. People are starting to wake up and see. There was a huge group of practitioners who were out protesting in front of Kellogg's, and I wish I could have been with them. I was at another conference at that time. But Kellogg's and a lot of companies have got 2 different ingredients labels, one in Europe and then one in the United States, because a lot of the food that we make here is banned in other countries, right? Like, wrap your brain around that one.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, just really digging deeper, being an advocate for yourself, and knowing that there can be another way if you're willing to look. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that ties to your earlier comment about persistence or whatever we were saying, about continuing to investigate even whatever the doctors are saying, and it's not solving the issue for you. Okay. So one other thing came to mind when you mentioned that, because you talked about, like, when you were talking about celiac, it was avoiding certain foods, not just grains, but other potential grain-containing food or gluten-containing foods. Some conditions, some autoimmune conditions that I understand, the first line of defense recommended from a natural standpoint is some sort of elimination diet, or potentially cutting out certain foods forever. And oftentimes it's a very unpalatable list of things, like 80% of what you would normally enjoy, even in a quote unquote healthy diet. I'm just curious of your thoughts of that, where, like, you're trying to make trade-offs for the rest of your life and you don't want to suffer either. And they're like, here's this biologic you can inject yourself with once a week and you'll be good. You know what I mean? How do people address that kind of decision point.
Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Again, a lot of that's mindset and a lot of
Uh-huh.
it can be done slowly over time. I am a rip the Band-Aid off type of gal. Not everybody can do
Mm.
what I do. Dr. Tom O'Brien, he's a huge hero for me and has been for the long time. And I had him on my show and he was like, Heather, you can do it slower. Like the first month you have them cut out wheat. And then the next month you have them cut out corn. And then the next month, and then in a year's time, right? And then it doesn't feel so heavy up front. I was like, oh yeah, I suppose you could do that. But like I
Yeah,
said, I'm kind of a rip the Band-Aid off. But I was also really, really sick and I really needed answers like
sure.
yesterday. So you can do it that way. A lot of it is mindset. A lot of it's just a new learning curve. I eat amazing. And that's why I made like a 7-video cooking series because I got so sick of people going, God, what can you eat? And I'm like, tonight I'm having short ribs with braised carrots and sweet potatoes.
Mm, that
Like
sounds good.
it's I am a badass cook.
You
Like
had me at short ribs.
we eat so good, it's ridiculous. And and there's a lot of variety in our diet. Like I just eat real food, meat, vegetables, fruit. Like there you go. And I'm not a fan of cutting out a lot of the starchy vegetables because
Mhm.
I know that they can help actually feed the microbiome in a certain way. If you cool it, eat it cooked and cooled, that helps with the starch resistance. If you eat it last, it can help with the blood sugar issues and never,
Oh
never, never,
yeah, that's
and
right.
never eat it naked. Always some sort of a healthy fat,
Because it
so
creates more resistant starch when you do that, right? The cook
correct.
and the cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool.
So, there's a couple different hacks that I do, but for the most part, and everybody's different too. I've started doing this genetic test, nutrition genome on people because I really want to find out. Because for the longest time, everyone was touting keto, keto, keto. I got on keto. It jacked me up.
Mhm.
Gained so much weight. I was in so much pain, and come to find out that my body does not process that much fat, even healthy fat. Like it was like And then I also had food sensitivities towards almonds and coconut at the time, which is hugely used in a lot of keto foods. So, I do better on a
Fair
little bit
point.
more of a paleo type diet. Even kind of a little on the Mediterranean side. So, I like finding out what works for a person instead of just this throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks or putting somebody on a one size fits all because we're just so different.
All right. Is there anything you wish I had asked today? Again, it was a very diverse conversation, but I think a good one. I think we covered a lot of helpful points for folks who are struggling with some of these and want to know what they could possibly do or what they should do. Anything you wish I had asked?
I know. I think we covered quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. Where can listeners learn more about you? I will definitely look up the comedy side, but from a health side, where do you want them to find you?
I am the renegade health boss across all platforms. And then I have a free Foundations of Health little mini ebook that you can find on rhbcourses.com. That's Renegade Health Boss, rhbcourses.com and get that free download and you can, start your journey today.
All right, cool. Yeah, we'll throw those in the show notes. I believe we're going to see each other again soon on your podcast. So we'll see. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.